Z738 and Z735M riding orders give you a crisp, clean finish to your lawn. John Deere compact tractors like the 3E series and the 4044M make tough tasks look easy. And right now they're offering great deals on these do-it-all machines. Stop by your local Green Tractor dealer today and get in the seat of a new John Deere that's ready for the work ahead.
I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy.
You can find previous podcasts and more information on a range of health topics at peoplespharmacy.com. Worried about your weight? Have you considered the new GLP-1 drugs?
Good morning, how you
Do
feeling?
they help control?
Hello, good morning.
I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Welcome to this podcast of the People's Pharmacy.
You can find previous podcasts and more information on a range of health topics at peoplespharmacy.com. Have you ever worried about your weight? Have you considered the new GLP-1 drugs? Do they help control cravings? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Today we talk with a former FDA commissioner. Like many of us, Dr. David Kessler has had trouble controlling his weight over the years. He's utilized the new drugs to overcome his nighttime food cravings.
Dr. Kessler's new book is Diet, Drugs, and Dopamine, the new science of achieving a healthy weight.
You'll also hear from anthropologist Dr. Herman Ponzer. His research shows that people around the world have very similar energy needs.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, the biology of weight, insights from the GLP-1 drugs and hunter-gatherers.
In the People's Pharmacy Health Headlines, if the U.S. follows the epidemiological patterns from Japan and Great Britain, we should expect flu season to go into overdrive soon. Japan is experiencing an early and unexpectedly severe start to its flu season. By early October, more than 4,000 people had been hospitalized with influenza, and many schools and daycare centers were closed to slow the spread of the virus among children. Some health experts worry that the virus is mutating to become more of a threat. The early arrival of influenza in Japan should not have come as a big surprise. That's because Australia also experienced an early and severe flu season. It peaked between June and July much earlier than usual. RSV, or respiratory syncytial virus, and SARS-CoV-2 were also rampant at the same time, putting the healthcare system under stress. British authorities report that the viruses that cause colds are also prevalent in the UK. Flu is on the rise there. As infections rise in Europe and Asia, America may not be far behind.
Viruses are not the only pathogens worrying public health authorities. The World Health Organization released a report this week alerting doctors that common bacterial infections are increasingly resistant to antibiotics. 1 in 6 bacterial infections in the study were no longer susceptible to the usual medications. More than 40% of antibiotics have lost potency over the last 7 years. Infections that are harder to treat include gonorrhea, urinary tract infections, and some GI infections such as E. coli. If we don't develop new ways of treating these pathogens, millions are likely to die in the coming years.
Measles is spreading around the country. Cases reached a 3-decade high this week. The very large outbreak in Texas has been declared over. However, there are pockets of infection in Minnesota, South Carolina, Utah, and Arizona. In several communities, students are being quarantined to prevent the spread of infection. In South Carolina, for example, 150 school kids have been quarantined because children in Spartanburg and Greenville counties were exposed to kids with measles. There have been nearly 1,600 cases reported in the U.S. this year. That's the highest number in 3 decades. This virus is highly contagious, and vaccination is the only way to prevent its spread. The MMR vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella is 97% effective against measles.
New guidelines for COVID vaccinations have a lot of people confused, including pharmacists who administer the shots. At first, the FDA only approved the new immunizations for people at very high risk or those over 65. Then the CDC suggested that anyone who wanted a COVID vaccine would need to consult a healthcare professional first to learn about risks and benefits. Some pharmacists interpreted that guidance as meaning that people would need a prescription before a shot could be administered. Then there was confusion as to whether insurance companies would pay for COVID vaccines. To make matters worse, different states may be adopting different guidelines. At the moment, though, most insurance companies are paying for COVID jabs.
Life expectancy has returned to pre-COVID levels. That's because COVID deaths have fallen from the number 1 cause of mortality in 2021 to number 20 in 2023. Worldwide, life expectancy is now 76.3 years for women and 71.5 years for men. In 1951, female global life expectancy at birth was 51.2 years, and male life expectancy was 47.9 years. So we have made progress over the last 70 years, but there is an alarming trend. Death rates are climbing among young adults and adolescents. This increase appears to be linked to depression, anxiety, suicide, alcohol, and drug abuse.
A new study in JAMA suggests that preteens who spend more time engaged with social media have a harder time learning in school. Those who increased their time on social media had more difficulty with reading, memory, and vocabulary as assessed by standardized tests. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. For the last several decades, Americans have been getting heavier. Nearly 3/4 of adults have been categorized as overweight, with 40% of us in the obese range. Why do we have so much trouble managing our weight?
We'll be talking today about the biology of weight, the enormous popularity of GLP-1 drugs like Wegovy or Ozempic can shed some light on this question. We'll also hear from an anthropologist whose research shows that our couch potato ways may be bad for our health, but they're not solely responsible for our weight problems.
First, though, we're talking with Dr. David Kessler. He served as Chief Science Officer of the White House COVID-19 response team under President Joe Biden, and previously served as Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration under Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Dr. Kessler is the author of The End of Overeating and Fast Carbs, Slow Carbs. His latest book is Diet, Drugs, and Dopamine, the new science of achieving a healthy weight.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. David Kessler.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Kessler, it is such an honor to be speaking with you, but I would like to take issue with the very first sentence of your new book. You state, and I quote, "I am average." And I would argue that you are far from average. You are a pediatrician, you're also an attorney, and you have been Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration under President George H.W. Bush, and you've been Chief Science Officer of the White House COVID-19 response team, and that's just for starters. You've also been Dean of Medical Schools, so far from average, but I suspect that in that first sentence, you're talking about body weight. So what do you mean when you say you are average?
I've struggled with my weight my entire life. I have suits in every size. I've gained and lost my weight at the end of, had the privilege of, as you mentioned, co-leading Operation Warp Speed. COVID was an intense period of time. I was working 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. I turned around and I found myself 40 pounds heavier. And I had gained weight, I had lost weight, but this mystery of weight. Why was it so hard? And no one could say, I think, I was able, to do these other jobs. No one ever accused me of not having adequate discipline, but when it came to weight, there I was, I think like many other people, this struggle, this mystery.
Dr. Kessler, you suggest that the food industry has hijacked our health. Would you expound on that a little bit, please?
Well, certainly, let's just start with what I think you mentioned, which is the real key for me. It's about our health. This is not about our weight. The fact is, the American body is ill. Only 12% of Americans are healthy. Only 12% when you look at measures of blood pressure, blood lipids, waist circumference, glucose, just basic metabolic measurements. And the culprit there, again, this is not about weight, right? It's about toxic fat. That fat that accumulates around our abdomen, that invades our liver, our pancreas, our heart, our skeletal muscle. That toxic fat is causing many cardiac, renal, metabolic diseases that lead to chronic disease. I knew that weight wasn't good for us. Even as a doc, I knew it wasn't good for us, but I didn't know it was causing these chronic diseases. So the problem is this toxic fat. And then the question is, what causes that toxic fat? And that gets in, to go back upstream to that, that's our diet, that's the food supply, that's the food industry.
Well, Dr. Kessler, you've given us a statistic that is mind-boggling, because you're saying that most of us are not healthy. The overwhelming majority of us. We have, as you pointed out, hypertension. Half of the population, adult population, has high blood pressure. But we also have blood sugar problems. We also have all kinds of other metabolic issues going on. Is that true in some of the places that you've visited around the world? Are other countries also suffering the way we are?
I think, it's fair. We've always led the world when it comes to public health in good ways. And I think we've also leading the world when it comes to, this issue. I think many countries are maybe not quite at the extent of the morbidity and mortality that we have, but I think unfortunately they're catching up. Understand, in our lifetime, 25% of us are going to go on to develop heart failure. Some 30 to 40% of us are going to go on to develop diabetes. 25%, are going to have a stroke. And much of that all those major killers, that chronic disease, right? Those things that cause in our senior years, yes, we may live as long, but we're going to be in a more disabled state because of that. We're not going to be as productive. That is all we're coming to realize. I think medicine is waking up to the fact that cardiologists, endocrinologists, obesity medicine, doctors, some neurologists, even oncologists, that many of these diseases, cardiac, kidney, endocrinological, metabolic, some about 13 forms of cancer, some of the neurodegenerative diseases. They have a common core, and it's this metabolic adiposity, this metabolic toxic fat that is causing it. And for the first time, I mean, the good news is for the first time we have the tools that can fix that. No magic answers, okay? No magic pills, but we do have tools that we can reclaim our health if you want.
Well, we do want to talk about that in just a moment, but I asked you about the food industry, and we actually have a government agency is supposed to be looking out oversight, supposed to be doing oversight on the food industry. It's an agency you're very familiar with. We call it the Food and Drug Agency. So what did the FDA get wrong about public health and nutrition?
So back in the 90s, when we had the opportunity to be at the agency, facts. I mean, go pick up any. I don't know if there's any packaged food in the studio, but that nutrition facts panel, that few inches has calories, fat, sugar, protein, and it was hailed as a major advance. And it was for its day. And still, many people rely on it when they look at food that they buy. What we didn't get, and I don't think anyone really got, were the consequences, the biological effects of that fat, sugar, and salt in our bodies. What was it doing to our insulin levels? What was it doing to the way we deposited fat? Right? We didn't understand the consequences fully of what we were putting in our bodies.
Dr. Kessler, you are renowned for going after the tobacco industry and the impact of nicotine. Tell us how the food industry evolved its own, shall we say, addictive power when it came to food. And we just have a couple of minutes before the break.
So in order to feed a hungry nation, back in the 1930s, 1940s, food industry learned to process food, to create this sort of alternative food system, this industrial food. Right? It was able to extend shelf life. It extracted certain, very cheap chemicals from food ingredients. Right? Took those, took out the water, were able to ship things over long distance, added in palatability, added fat, sugar, and salt, these other modified starches and other chemical ingredients, right? And this was the modern industrial processed ultra food supply. And the advantage, it was cheap, it fed a hungry nation, it was convenient, and it replaced